Hey guys, so this week I have seen some forum posts as well as talked to some people who have had Jeep roof leaking problems. Now I have had these problems myself on 2 Jeeps, and so I just wanted to take a few minutes, make a video. It was due time for my maintenance on my hardtop as well, so I'll just kind of walk you through what I observe when looking at the design of the Jeep and some pointers that I found particularly useful, and it's solved some minor leaking issues on 2 of my Jeeps now. Now I don't claim that this will solve everybody's issues. It sounds like some are pretty bad, and I know that even Mopar has a kit to help alleviate them. So if it is bad and this video doesn't solve it, you may have to go to your dealership and get that kit, but all the same principles will apply. So the first thing to note is that this rain gutter on the front freedom panels is kind of dammed at both ends. There's kind of a block here and it tapers right in here. So while this will keep water from falling immediately on a passenger as they enter and exit, it I believe will fill with water and direct the water through these cracks and hopefully down and around the front of this. So this is one of the spots I think you have to focus on a lot. I know there is kind of no getting away from water dripping down here, especially when the door's open, and it will drip across the door as it's open and closed, especially if you just wash the vehicle and there's a lot of excess water or it's a heavy rainstorm. And so as the water drips here, you can kind of see how it's caught by this door seal. And I'll open up the door here. So you can see how it's kind of caught by the seal, and there's this slight flange here to kind of help direct the water down and around the door, and then down the length of the door. Any water that gets past that little seal does have another opportunity to kind of fit in here and also drain down to the door jamb there, which isn't such a big deal because it should stay on the outside of this flange that goes around the door and stay on the outside of the sill and drain out and off the side of the Jeep. While we have the door open, you can also see the makeup of this upper seal here on the door, and it does seal up against the freedom panel, and I believe the intent is that the freedom panel will drain the water around the outside of this seal, and then anything that does get in here does have an opportunity to kind of drain out the back end of the seal. Something to note is here at the top of this seal, this area is actually kind of segregated. So the way that water would flow down the front of the door is, distinctly different to how it would flow down the back of the door. Taking a look here at the seals on the inside of the door frame, you can also see this hardtop may actually have had, dealer intervention for leaking before, because I know that the kit that the dealer has to help resolve the issue does include some of this kind of foam tape that you see on the hardtop right now. And then if you take a look at this seal as well, there's some more of that tape. Now I can actually see a bad sign here, and this is that the seal is starting to fold over right here on this corner. I'll probably have to try address that just because really from the issues that I've found and even seen with other people's Jeeps is folded seals here are kind of the main culprit of minor leaking. Specifically, I find that this rear seal here is often installed incorrectly, and it's easy to fold this rubber flap in when bringing the hardtop down on it, the freedom panel down on it. Here I've removed the freedom panels, and this is the driver's side specifically, and if you look at the perimeter of it, it's really just flat surfaces for kind of a good mating surface with the seal itself. It itself does not have really much kind of high-tech provisions or anything that's too finicky when it comes to leaks. I think some of this foam tape here and here would be to help make up any kind of deficiencies in that contact surface with the seal. And so I could see that if those were too deteriorated, that they could cause issues. But I do suspect they probably are more for sound and wind noise than they would be for water ingress. So double check them, but and certainly focus on the seals when they're installed, just to make sure that there is rubber touching the hardtop panels as much as you can tell. Now, the passenger side panel is quite a bit different though. And so this panel needs to be treated with a lot of respect once it's removed from the vehicle, because you don't want to damage this seal at all. And so you can kind of see it's almost two mating surfaces here. One is like your other hardtop would be coming up to, just like 1/8 of an inch away from this one. And then you have your main seal a ways in. And so the water, can find its way in here. I think a lot of it will follow this line here, and you can see on mine too. It's very dirty, kind of in this really tight crack, and not that dirty here. But I believe that this is kind of a catch-all for any water that goes beyond this and forms a bit of a trough from front to back to direct the water into kind of some hidden gutters that I'll show you here in a second. So again, when you're reinstalling the Freedom panels, just make sure you're being very cognizant of how these seals lay on the roof of the vehicle. Here's another good example at the front leading edge of the passenger side Freedom panel. There is a piece of a seal that is extremely thin and can easily be folded under itself. All right, now with the Freedom panels off, you can kind of see the main seals here at the rear trailing edge of the Freedom panels where they would be sitting down. And I'd almost call this a double seal as well, just because there's kind of a bit of give here on a larger bump where I think most of the panel pressure would be applied, but then there's also this kind of scooped up edge here, which I think is supposed to be kind of the first point of contact with the panel, and then as it compresses, it creates that barrier to any moisture that gets under there, and kind of helps direct it down and around the panel. Kind of is reinforced here, where this almost channels the water and becomes like a gutter, directing it down and around the edge of the door. And again, anything that gets in here or comes out here should stay on the outside of the vehicle rather than kind of making its way onto the inside of the vehicle, because it will still stay to the outside edge. And then looking back here, if you live in an area and you park your vehicle outside, getting needles and leaves and stuff, they do have to be cleaned out periodically. So I know there's some people who kind of have no interest in using the Jeep topless, and I still think that it's good maintenance practice to remove your Freedom panels at least every couple months, clean it out, and condition the seals. And so here too, you can see where that center piece on the passenger side Freedom panel would kind of nest into here, and these are actually little drain ports in the center that direct water down and around, and then outside out here through this little crack here. And so while I've never had it as a problem, you probably would want to inspect the seal and how it's connected to the hardtop here. Just make sure it's firmly affixed. You can see this raised edge here, which I also believe is used to be kind of like a fail-safe for water coming forward, and it should kind of catch that and direct it outwards as far as possible. The other thing too, and I'm not sure how you would troubleshoot it, but just making sure that these drain holes are indeed not blocked. I don't know if compressed air or something like that to help clean them out. And this is true too if you have a vehicle with an electronic sunroof. Most of them don't actually seal water out. They just allow water to kind of be collected on the inside in an engineered way and then drain out through the four corners through special ducting. Now I find this front seal kind of specifically interesting, and it's very clearly two pieces. The first one here, you can see where it's making a connection with your freedom panel, and in mine you can see it stays very clean, which is a good sign because it's showing that dust and moisture and everything is staying outside and being prevented from getting it into the Jeep at all. You can kind of see down into here, there's some kind of dried water stains, so it must not be perfect, and there is a little bit of moisture coming through. But if you look down this whole channel, it's kind of a continuous, sorry for the roof rack there, it's continuous all the way across the Jeep. So again, just paying very particular attention to all of these small pieces of the rubber gasket. Just make sure that they're all in good condition, making sure that they're all clean and kind of in the position that they were designed to be. Nothing's folded over. Again, like I've said, I've seen this get folded right over, people installing the hardtops incorrectly, and that could certainly be a problem. And then same with back here. It's easy to kind of force this back on itself or something like that, which could negatively affect the kind of the water flow. So it's not about making the Jeep tops waterproof. It's more about directing the flow of water that's inevitably going to get through the first seal at least, and directing it around and to the outsides of the Jeep. So I'm going to go ahead now and do some preventative maintenance on my own and clean all this up, and yeah, hopefully we'll be good for several more months. If you don't mind getting the inside of your Jeep a little bit dirty, compressed air is a good way to clean all this. Alright, so I kind of blew out all these seals. I was able to confirm with compressed air that these two drain holes do direct water all the way down into here. It actually comes out this little crack here. I could feel the air as I used compressed air to blow into the other side. So that was cool. Something I didn't really know 100%, always suspected, but I never actually did this test before today. Yeah, that really makes a good point about these drainage passages, that if you're having leaking, a very likely spot is this area here. So the water that's falling onto the center of the two freedom panels, and then finding its way into the kind of the grooves of the seal, needs to flow rearward into this. If this is at all dirty, or this seal is at all compromised here, it could very easily spill water into the Jeep. This is probably, now that I look at it, probably one of the most susceptible places to leaks, and kind of one of the weakest designs there. So next up, I'm actually going to condition these seals using this gummy fledge. I think I got this on Amazon. My dad was the one who did all the research, and this seemed to be all the rage on the forums. I think some of the OEM dealerships were using it on their cars, BMW I think specifically, and so I've used it. I can't say I have much experience with any alternative products, but it seems to work nicely. It's kind of got a nice citronella-y smell, so yeah. So I've just cleaned up and conditioned the door seals, as well as the seals here on the top of the Jeep. And just one thing to note is right here, it looks kind of like it's susceptible to water kind of ingress into the inside of the vehicle. I believe this is probably another big issue. Make sure this rib's in kind of good condition, because anything that drips and falls on the outside of this small little ridge will stay kind of on the outside of the seal, even here, because there's this big metal lip where the seal's actually tucked in. And if water gets onto that side of the door, it's still going to stay on the outside of the Jeep. Whereas if it comes over this little ridge here, it's now on the inside of the door. And that's where you could have problems with water coming into the inside of the vehicle, and especially the floor wells. So this outer seal here touches the A-pillar, and then this secondary seal, it's kind of another way for water to be kind of guided down right into the door jamb. And again, if it falls into the door jamb, more than likely it'll stay on the outside of the vehicle. And then yeah, this one here is kind of, this one here is kind of for all the water falling off the roof to stay kind of on the outside of the seals and drain all the way down the outside of the door. And don't forget to also condition the seal on the Freedom panel itself. So we'll take a look here too, and I'll just show you at the back how particular this kind of seal surface is. You can see it does look like a lot of gunk's been added here to help aid in that seal. So I do imagine that that is probably a place that this Jeep in particular had a problem in the past, and perhaps not even the kind of cleaning could have resolved that. It did require some additional material to help create that watertight seal. All right, so just did a initial conditioning of the passenger side Freedom top seal, and I wanted to call out that just pay specific attention to this side of the seal. So this is kind of that rain gutter to direct water through the ductwork at the trailing edge of the Freedom panels, and so it can kind of be opened up here with your finger, and just make sure you spend some particular attention to cleaning out this gap. All right, both panels are back on. What you didn't see off camera was that I have cleaned all the fiberglass pieces where the rubber gaskets made up. I cleaned that all with rubbing alcohol just to make sure that the seals were given a good place to seat. The panels, I always like to put them both on loosely. That means not securing the front kind of clasp or putting the screw at the rear in. And what I'm looking for when I do that is I just like to make sure that this leading edge is parallel all the way across, and then it lines up with the next panel as well. And then that should mean that this gap down the center panel, or between the two panels, is also nice and parallel. Because the two panels obviously are molded and designed to kind of work in this way, I just want to be extra diligent that when I reinstall the panels, everything goes in just as it should. Now when you are reinstalling these screws, just make sure that you're not over tightening them. What I like to do is get them kind of snug, have them pulled down a little ways, and you kind of get the get a feel for it over time. So that looks pretty good to me. Next, I'll latch the front ones. So once you're done, just go ahead and double check everything. Make sure everything's aligned, make sure that there's no obvious signs of seals being pinched, and you should be good to go. So with that, have a great day. Enjoy the Super Bowl if you're gonna watch it, and make sure that you like and subscribe to stay on top of my other content. Thank you very much. Bye. Now, after the fact, I have been thinking about this design of the hardtop and how it kind of has these swoops built into it. The story I'm reminded of is a friend who had parked his Jeep facing uphill for a weekend and a weekend of rain. And when he got in it and started driving and had to either turn around and start going downhill, all of a sudden there was a wave of water that hit him in the back of the neck. And so thinking about this, if the Jeep is parked angled, like facing forward up a hill, and I showed you how there's kind of that ductwork at the back of the Freedom panels and kind of leading edge of the hardtop that directs water from that center point along and down. This would become a big container of water because water's not going to flow uphill here and drain out here while the Jeep's facing up. So if you park your Jeep facing uphill and you go to move it after a rainstorm or something like that, you know, an amount of water will have accumulated in the hardtop. And if you don't have a perfect seal there, you know, the water could easily find a place to escape into the cabin rather than taking its time and coming out these specific ducts here. So if you live in a place like that where you're leaving your Jeep outside in the rain, I do suggest facing it downhill so that the water can kind of run off and over the front windshield or into that kind of massive gutter that runs the length of this. That's a far simpler design and would just drain off either of these corners.